He mocked him. In front of a crowd of Hollywood's elite. Cameras flashing. Smiles fading. When Tom Cruise turned to Denzel Washington and took a jab that left the room silent, no one knew it wasn't just a joke, it was the first strike in something deeper. Something personal. But what happened next didn't just flip the script. It made the entire audience question who the real star was. When silence met arrogance, and grace met pride, one question echoed louder than the insult itself. What do you do when the world's most respected man refuses to clap back and just walks away? It was supposed to be just another glittering night in Hollywood. The A-list crowd had packed into the Beverly Grand Ballroom for the annual Stars for Hope charity gala, a celebration of celebrity generosity, laughter, and goodwill. Flashbulbs went off like lightning as icons poured in, each one dressed in designer elegance, ready to mingle and shine. Tom Cruise, still sharp and undeniably charismatic at 62, arrived early, taking selfies, working the crowd. He was loud, energetic, exactly what people expected. But behind the big grin, those close to him knew something had shifted. His last few films had bombed. The buzz around him wasn't the same. There were whispers. His slipping. And he could hear them. Then came Denzel. The room shifted. Not because he tried to make it shift, but because that's what happens when dignity enters a room. Denzel Washington, with his quiet confidence and steady walk, didn't need flash. He'd just won a Lifetime Achievement Award in London 2 weeks earlier. Still humble. Still respected. And still, the kind of man Hollywood quietly measured itself against. When the host announced a surprise on-stage moment between two legends, the crowd buzzed with excitement. Tom and Denzel were called up to auction off a private dinner for charity. Cameras ready. Microphones live. It started light. Tom cracked jokes. Denzel smiled, played along. But then Tom's tone shifted. He leaned in, voice louder, grin stretched just a bit too wide. You know, Denzel's one of those guys who just squints and stares real hard, and boom, Oscar. I've got to hang off planes, jump off buildings, and they still say I'm just doing stunts. The room chuckled, nervously. Denzel's expression didn't change. Tom kept going. I mean, let's be real, Denzel doesn't act, he just lectures people slowly. And somehow that's genius. Silence. For the first time all night, you could hear the air conditioning hum. Denzel didn't flinch. He didn't laugh. He just looked at Tom, calmly, without emotion. It was the kind of look that says more than words ever could. The host tried to move on. People clapped awkwardly. The auction resumed. But the energy had changed. Something sacred had been crossed. Backstage, whispers flew. Was that planned? Did he really say that? Someone in the crowd posted the moment online. The video hit 1 million views before the dessert was even served. The media would label it the gala jab. But to those who were there, it felt like something else. Not just a joke gone too far, but the moment one man tried to pull another down in front of the world, and the other refused to take the bait. Tom walked off stage, still smiling, but his eyes darted nervously. Denzel exited without a word, straight to his car. No interviews. No reaction. That silence. It hit harder than anything Tom had said. Long before the cameras, the red carpets, and the headlines, Denzel Washington was just a boy growing up in Mount Vernon, New York. His father was a Pentecostal preacher. His mother owned a beauty salon. Discipline wasn't optional, it was the air he breathed. Denzel never dreamed of fame. What he wanted was purpose. After a rough patch as a teenager, he found it in the theater, where he discovered that storytelling could heal. While his classmates chased shortcuts and attention, Denzel worked. Quietly. Obsessively. He studied Shakespeare while others memorized punchlines. He trained at Fordham, then went to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. He built a career brick by brick, roll by roll, never chasing the spotlight but earning it. He once said, "Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship." That mindset would shape everything he became. Across the coast, a very different journey was unfolding. Tom Cruise, born in Syracuse, bounced from place to place. 14 schools in total. A rough childhood. a father he once called a merchant of chaos. Tom found order in performance, energy, attention. His break came early with Risky Business, then superstardom with Top Gun. His rise was fast. Too fast. People loved his smile, his stunts, his charm. He became the face of action. But with that fame came a hunger to stay on top. Not just to act, but to dominate. Tom built his legacy around control of his image, his films, even his co-stars. While Denzel found power in stillness, Tom found it in noise. Back in the present, the clip from the gala kept spreading. Commentators replayed it on loop. Headlines asked the same question: was Tom out of line? Opinion pieces flooded in. Some called it comedy. Others called it envy. But beneath the noise, fans started to revisit what made these two men so different. Denzel, the man who refused to be seen in tabloids, who never chased awards yet had 2 Oscars. Tom, the man who'd clung to franchises, chased blockbusters, and famously never won one. People pulled up old interviews. One resurfaced where Denzel said, "My mother told me, man gives the award, God gives the reward." It hit harder now. It wasn't just a quote. It was a philosophy. Inside Hollywood circles, the divide grew. Younger actors whispered about the moment behind closed doors. One rising star said, "That night showed us everything we needed to know." Directors started discussing casting choices. Publicists scrambled. Some said Tom should issue an apology. Others said he should double down. But Tom, he went silent too. Not out of wisdom, but confusion. He hadn't expected this. He thought it would land differently. That people would laugh. That maybe it would remind the world he still had edge. What he didn't understand was that legacy isn't something you shout. It's something that speaks for itself. Behind closed doors, Tom's team huddled. One agent pitched a redemption arc: host the Golden Light Awards, he said. Make it funny, classy. Invite Denzel. Shake hands on stage. Turn it into a moment. Tom wasn't sure, but the headlines were getting worse. The buzz around his new film had flatlined. One tweet read, "Tom Cruise is trying to be funny while standing next to royalty." Another said, "Denzel didn't say a word and still stole the room." For the first time in decades, Tom felt small. Not because he was irrelevant, but because, for once, someone had outshined him by doing absolutely nothing. Denzel, meanwhile, stayed out of the spotlight. He was seen walking his dog, reading at a local library, visiting a church in Harlem. When asked by a reporter about the gala, he simply said, "God bless him," and moved on. No anger. No shade. Just grace. But when a formal invitation arrived asking him to speak at the Golden Light Awards, people noticed. He hadn't been scheduled. But after the gala moment, the organizers wanted him front and center. It was the same event Tom was now hosting. The setup was clear. A shared stage. Again. For Denzel, the decision wasn't about revenge. He didn't believe in that. But he did believe in moments. In truth. In allowing silence to say what words couldn't. He accepted the invitation. Not for a feud. But because sometimes, being present is louder than any speech. The morning after the gala, the internet was on fire. Hashtags like #CruiseClowning and #DenzelSilence trended for hours. Memes flooded social media. One showed Denzel's calm face next to a roaring Tom with the caption, "The difference between noise and power." Another quoted Denzel's blank stare as the moment Cruise knew he messed up. Talk shows replayed the clip, dissecting every gesture, every pause. Some tried to defend Tom, saying it was just comedy. Others saw right through it. But most agreed, Denzel's refusal to react was the loudest message of the night. And what made it worse for Tom was that no matter how many times he smiled or shrugged, he couldn't seem to take back the energy he had thrown out there. By noon, a dozen media outlets had requested statements. Denzel's team declined every single one. No interviews. No follow-ups. No opinion. Just silence. Tom's camp, on the other hand, was scrambling. One advisor suggested writing an open letter. Another pushed for a live apology. A third warned, If you pretend like it never happened, you'll look arrogant. If you say too much, it'll look fake. Tom sat in his Los Angeles home, scrolling through endless tweets. Some hurt more than others. This wasn't a joke. This was insecurity with a MIC. Tom Cruise just showed us why Denzel's different. It wasn't just fans piling on. Quietly, respected industry voices chimed in. Directors, writers, even actors Tom had worked with before. A few unfollowed him publicly. One commented, "That wasn't class. That was ego." Denzel, meanwhile, went on with his life. That week, he visited a youth theater program in Brooklyn. No press, just presence. A video leaked of him talking to students. He said, "Let your work speak for you. The louder they get, the quieter you stay." It was meant for those kids. But online, it felt like a message to the world. The calm after the storm. That same day, the Golden Light Awards released a new promo video with Tom Cruise as the main host. Glittering music. Clips from his movies. Promises of a big night. But tucked in the middle was a small announcement. Denzel Washington would be receiving a surprise honor for his contribution to film and culture. That changed everything. The press ate it up. Denzel and Tom to share the same stage again, the headlines read. Awkward or iconic? One late-night host joked, "It's either going to be a redemption or a roast." But for Tom, this wasn't funny anymore. He hadn't expected Denzel to accept. He assumed the silence meant avoidance. But now, the spotlight was back, and this time, he wasn't sure how to hold it. Behind the scenes, Tom's team was nervous. The whole event was now framed around their tension. Reporters were getting credentials just to watch the interaction. Would Tom acknowledge what happened? Would Denzel ignore him? Or would there be a confrontation? One staffer said bluntly, "The whole country's watching for that handshake." Tom tried rehearsing lines. A joke here. A compliment there. But nothing felt right. Every draft sounded forced. The truth was, no script could fix this. On the night before the awards, Tom sat in his dressing room alone. No cameras. No crowd. Just the weight of everything he had created. He stared into the mirror. Not at the star. Not at the legend. But at the man who, in a single moment of trying to look bigger, had made himself small. He picked up the phone. Called his agent. "What if I just let him speak?" he asked. "What if I say nothing?" His agent paused. "That might be the smartest thing you've said in 2 weeks." Meanwhile, Denzel had already written his speech. It wasn't long. It wasn't flashy. But it was sharp. It wasn't about Tom. It wasn't even about the gala. It was about respect. About legacy. About what it means to stand firm when the world tries to rattle you. And it ended with one sentence circled in red ink: "Power isn't how loud you speak, it's how deeply you're heard." He planned to say it slowly. Let it land. Let it sit. As both men prepared to stand before the world again, no one knew what would happen. But something in the air had shifted. This wasn't just a fallout. It was a reckoning. A moment that would define not just 2 careers, but 2 kinds of greatness. One built on volume. The other on silence. The night of the Golden Light Awards arrived like a thunderstorm waiting to break. Every seat was filled, every camera loaded, every eye wide open. Outside, the red carpet shimmered with sequins, lights, and speculation. Reporters barely mentioned the films being honored. All anyone cared about was the moment, the stare-down, the speech, the clash. Tom Cruise showed up early, dressed in a perfect black tux, jaw clenched just slightly tighter than usual. He posed, smiled, signed a few autographs, but his eyes darted constantly, searching. Not for the crowd. Not for the photographers. But for the man everyone was waiting to see. Denzel Washington arrived half an hour later. No entourage. No flair. Just a quiet presence in a deep navy suit. He walked with ease. Waved softly. And made his way inside. The buzz was instant. Phones went up. Photos flew online. The caption of the night spread like wildfire. "It's happening." The ceremony began with laughter and applause. Comedians joked, actors cried, The usual glamour rolled on. But everyone felt the build-up. There was a tension in the air like static. Even the host made a joke early on, "Stick around for the last act, we may have a Hollywood history lesson live on stage." Laughter followed, but it was nervous. Everyone knew what was coming. Tom was introduced as the evening's main host halfway through the program. He walked on stage, spotlight on him, applause loud but not deafening. He thanked the crowd, talked about film, talked about legacy, then tried to loosen the room. A few jokes here and there. The usual cruise charm. But the crowd didn't fully bite. The laughter felt hollow. He paused, looked down at his notes, then looked up. "I want to take a moment," he said, "to acknowledge someone here tonight who represents not just excellence, but grace." A murmur spread through the crowd. Tom continued, "There's no one in this room who hasn't been moved by his work. There's no actor who hasn't been shaped by his presence. And there's no moment greater than when we recognize true greatness." He motioned toward the audience. "Mr. Denzel Washington, please join me on stage." The camera found Denzel sitting still, calm. For a beat, he didn't move. Then he stood. No smile. No frown. Just calm. He walked toward the stage slowly, the entire room standing with him. Tom reached out a hand. Denzel stepped up but didn't shake it. He nodded instead. The room froze. Tom stepped back. "I want to offer this stage to you," he said. "Because the truth is, you don't need anyone to introduce you. Your work speaks for itself." Denzel stood before the microphone. Silence. Not a cough. Not a whisper. He looked around slowly, taking his time. Then he began. "We live in a world that teaches us to talk fast, to move fast, to chase faster. But the truth, the real truth, is not in speed. It's in stillness." His voice was low, steady. And sometimes, when the noise gets too loud, the most powerful thing you can do is stay silent. A wave of electricity moved through the room. No names were mentioned. No fingers pointed. But everyone felt the heat. He went on. "This industry can test your patience, your values, your name. But let me tell you what never fades. Character. When the lights go out, and the credits roll, that's what remains. Character." He paused again. The crowd was glued to him. And sometimes, when people say too much, you don't need to say anything. You just need to be who you are. Stand firm. Stay true. And remember, power isn't in volume. It's in value. With that, he turned away from the mic. Tom, standing just feet behind him, looked frozen. Denzel walked past him without a second glance. The room stood silent. Then, slowly, a single clap echoed. Then another. Then a wave of applause broke out like a dam had been cracked. The audience roared, not just for the speech, but for the restraint. For the message. For the lesson. Tom turned back to the mic. He opened his mouth. Closed it. For once, he had no words. And in that moment, Denzel taught him something no film, no award, no studio ever could. He didn't win by fighting. He won by standing. Just when the dust from the award night began to settle and the world thought it had seen the full story, a new piece of information surfaced that shifted everything. A short, grainy video clip leaked online late one evening. At first, it didn't seem like much, just a few seconds of behind-the-scenes footage from the charity gala weeks earlier. But within hours, it exploded. The clip showed Tom Cruise, standing in a quiet corner with his agent and two staffers, moments before going on stage. The audio wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. You could hear Tom say, "I'm going to poke at Denzel a bit. It'll go viral. They love that stuff." And he won't say anything, he never does. His agent laughed. Another voice said, "Just don't go too hard." And Tom replied, "Don't worry, it's just for buzz. We need a moment." The video raced through the internet like a fire through dry grass. Major news outlets picked it up. Influencers analyzed it. Suddenly, what had seemed like a clumsy attempt at humor was revealed to be something worse, calculated, planned. A deliberate shot designed not just to be funny, but to shake Denzel's image and stir attention back to Tom. People felt betrayed. The public mood shifted fast. If Tom had seemed desperate before, now he seemed manipulative. Fans who had defended him now fell silent. Others turned on him completely. The hashtags changed overnight. Now it wasn't just #Denzel silence or #Cruz clowning. It was #scripted mockery and #respect is power. Commentators, journalists, and even former co-stars began to speak out. One well-known director tweeted, "Denzel is what every actor hopes to become." That clip was hard to watch. A respected actress wrote, "You don't build yourself up by tearing down someone who's never disrespected anyone. That's not legacy. That's panic." The narrative had changed. And for Tom, there was no spinning it now. Meanwhile, Denzel remained quiet. He didn't respond to the clip. No statement. No tweet. No interview. But his actions spoke louder. That same week, he showed up at a local acting school in Atlanta to give a surprise talk to students. A video of that visit went viral. In it, he said, "Let the work stand. Let the truth show. Everything else is noise." No one missed the meaning. The leaked clip didn't just change how people viewed Tom. It sparked a bigger conversation. Morning shows brought in psychologists and media analysts. They talked about ego, about the fear of fading fame, about how people react when their spotlight dims and someone else's light stays steady. Articles explored the difference between loud confidence and quiet strength. Young actors reposted Denzel's speech from the awards with captions like, "This is how you move when you know who you are." But something else happened too, something no one expected. That final line in Denzel's speech, "Power isn't in volume, it's in value," became a rallying cry. It showed up on t-shirts, mugs, posters. High schools printed it in yearbooks. Graduation speakers quoted it. It wasn't just a quote anymore. It was a reminder, a lesson, a mirror to the world. And slowly, it started changing the way people thought about success and status. Tom, on the other hand, went quiet. His next public appearance was cancelled. His team issued a short, cold statement, "Mr. Cruz has no comment at this time." But behind closed doors, there were meetings. Heated ones. His image had taken a hit, and no PR plan seemed strong enough to cover it. Studios became nervous. One paused talks on a new film deal. Another quietly replaced him as a presenter at an upcoming festival. His inner circle shrank. Even those who had laughed with him before the gala now kept their distance. In private, Tom watched the backlash unfold like someone watching himself from the outside. The moment that was supposed to bring him back into the spotlight had only pulled the curtain back further. It wasn't just a public stumble, it was a personal unraveling. And worse, it had forced people to see something he'd kept hidden for a long time. The fear of not being the biggest name in the room anymore. And yet, through all of it, Denzel never said a word against him. No tweets. No shade. No interviews. Just work. Just presence. Just the kind of quiet dignity that, somehow, had said everything that needed to be said. The truth was out. And now, it wasn't just a story about two actors. It had become something much bigger, a moment of truth that exposed what fame can do and what character can undo. 2 weeks after the leaked video and the firestorm that followed, the world had mostly moved on. The media shifted focus to the next scandal, the next viral moment, the next celebrity feud. But the wound left behind hadn't healed for Tom Cruise. He'd gone underground. No public sightings. No new announcements. Rumors spread about cancelled meetings, angry calls with agents, and sleepless nights. His image, once bulletproof, now looked fragile. The man who had built his brand on fearlessness now seemed afraid to face the very spotlight he used to crave. His team floated ideas to help him bounce back, a sit-down interview, a charity campaign, maybe even a public apology. But nothing stuck. Nothing felt right. Deep down, Tom knew none of it would work because this wasn't about press. This was about something deeper. Something he could no longer control. One night, he hosted a private gathering at his home in Beverly Hills. It wasn't a party, more like a quiet dinner with a few close names from the industry. A small circle of producers, directors, and longtime friends. The goal was simple: reconnect. Rebuild some trust. Maybe just feel like himself again.
No cámaras.
No press. Just a chance to reset. The lights were soft. Music low. A chef served elegant food. Guests kept the conversation light. No one mentioned the gala. No one brought up the video. It was the unspoken rule in the room: don't say what everyone's thinking. Then, something happened. Halfway through dinner, as the main course was being cleared, the butler quietly approached Tom and whispered something in his ear. His eyes widened, confused. He looked toward the door. Standing there, calm, quiet, and alone, was Denzel Washington. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. Forks froze. Glasses stopped mid-air. It didn't feel real. Denzel hadn't been invited. He hadn't called ahead. He had just shown up. Tom stood up slowly, unsure whether to be nervous or thankful. The room was holding its breath. Denzel walked in with no expression on his face. He nodded at a few familiar faces, then made his way directly to Tom. The two men stood just feet apart. Tom tried to speak, but Denzel raised his hand. Not to silence him. Not to scold him. Just to pause him. Then, in one slow movement, Denzel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. No label. No card. Just clean, simple wrapping. He handed it to Tom. Tom looked at it, then looked back at Denzel, confused. "What is this?" he asked. Denzel finally spoke. "Perspective." That was it. One word. And then he turned around and walked back toward the door. Tom didn't move. He just stared at the box in his hands. No one dared say a word until the door clicked shut behind Denzel. Inside the box was a framed photo. It was black and white. Grainy. An old picture of two young actors, barely in their 20s, sitting backstage on folding chairs. One of them was Tom. The other was Denzel. Neither of them famous yet. Just dreamers in cheap suits, waiting for a casting call. The frame had a small engraving at the bottom. 4 words. "Who are you becoming?" Tom didn't cry. But his eyes burned. Not from shame. Not from guilt. From recognition. For the first time in weeks, he saw himself not as the superstar, the brand, the legend, but as the kid in that photo who had once been hungry, not for attention, but for purpose. The story of that night spread in whispers. No media footage. No tweets. Just quiet retellings from those who were there. And that made it even more powerful. Because it wasn't about being seen. It was about what couldn't be unseen. Denzel hadn't come to hurt him. He hadn't come to lecture him. He had come to show him something, a version of himself that still lived somewhere beneath the noise. In the weeks that followed, Tom began stepping back. He paused upcoming press tours. Cancelled one film. Took meetings with small directors. He even reached out to a few young actors he had mentored years ago, just to listen. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't explain himself. But slowly, people began to notice a shift. The tone. The silence. The humility. Denzel, meanwhile, said nothing publicly. He didn't need to. Because the story had already been told. Not in words. But in actions. And in a world full of noise, that's what people remembered most.